Here's Section I, the night she came out of the storm, written to your specifications. Opening mid-action, purely an immediate scene, and keeping tension alive without exposition outside what's happening. Section I, the night she came out of the storm. Snow rattled the shutters like bones in a jar. The wind had a voice to it tonight. Low, furious, curling around the cabin as if hunting for a way inside. Jedediah Boone set another log on the fire and listened to the storm's teeth scrape the roof. The kettle hissed. Then came the pounding. Not wind, not a branch. Fists, weak but desperate, hammering the door. 3 blows, a pause, then one more that slipped away like whoever hit it had no strength left. Jed moved slow, quiet, hands slipping toward the rifle prop beside the hearth. The pounding didn't come again. Only the hiss of the kettle and the long, aching moan of the wind. He crossed to the door, thumbed back the latch, and opened a crack. Snow blasted in, stinging his face. Through it, a shape, half collapsed, swaying, clutching something small against her chest. Her hair was dark with ice, her breath ragged and loud. The bundle in her arms squirmed. A child's face, pale as milk, peered up through the storm. Jed pulled them inside before the wind could steal them away. The door slammed shut against the gale. Snow spiraled down onto the floorboards where they stood dripping. The woman's coat was torn at the side. Dark blood seeped through, trickling slow. She tried to speak, failed, then braced herself on the table. "Sit," Jed said, voice flat, already hauling the kettle off the fire. The girl clung to her mother's skirt, eyes darting around the cabin. Fire, tools, shadows. Her teeth chattered. Jed set a chair close to the hearth. The woman eased into it, sucking in a sharp breath when her side touched the backrest. Her eyes flicked toward the rifle by the fire, then to him. "Hold still," he said, crouching. The heat of the flames painted her face in gold and shadow. He took a knife from his belt, slit her coat open from hem to shoulder. She flinched but didn't cry out. Beneath, a faded calico dress was stuck to her skin with blood. The wound was high along her ribs, shallow, but wide. A bullet graze. Jed poured steaming water into a tin basin, tore a strip from a flour sack, and cleaned the cut. She hissed when the cloth touched her, knuckles whitening on the armrest. The girl crept closer, watching his hands. "You're safe now," Jed said, not looking at her. The woman's gaze stayed on him, as if weighing the truth of those words. Outside, something shifted in the wind. The sound carried into the howl of the storm, a faint crunch, like snow giving beneath boots. Jed's head turned. He stared at the door for a long breath, then went back to binding the wound. "You'll live," he said. The woman exhaled, shaky. "We can't stay long. Storm says otherwise." Her eyes flickered toward the shuttered windows. "They'll find us if we stay in the open." Jed tied the cloth tight, wiped his hands on his trousers, and fed the fire until it roared. The girl had wandered to the hearth, holding her hands out to the heat. Around her neck hung a thin chain with a small, battered locket. The brass was dented and worn, but she clutched it like it was worth more than gold. Jed poured her a tin cup of hot water, added a pinch of dried peppermint. She accepted it without a word, eyes wide and unblinking. The woman leaned forward, one hand pressed to her bandaged side. "Thank you." Jed only nodded. The wind surged, rattling the cabin walls. For a moment, it sounded like a voice calling from far down the canyon. The woman's head lifted, listening. Her grip tightened on the chair. "We need to." Jed raised a hand, silencing her. He moved to the window, eased one shutter open just enough to peer through. Snow swirled in the dark, the moon just a smear of pale light. Nothing moved. Still, he shut the latch, pulled the heavy wool curtain across, and went back to the fire. "You'll rest here," he said, "till the storm's done." The woman hesitated, then gave the smallest of nods. The girl sipped her drink, steam curling up between them. She looked at Jed and said, "Mama says you can tell when someone's lying just by looking at them." Jed stared back at her. The fire popped. "She's right." The child smiled faintly, as if she'd found out something important. The kettle began to hiss again. Outside, the wind rose and the snow thickened. swallowing the world. Jed sat by the fire, his rifle within reach, and said nothing. From the corner, the old rocking chair creaked once in the draft. Empty, but moving like something unseen had brushed past. The woman's eyes closed, her breath slowing. The girl leaned against her knee, the locket glinting in the firelight. The storm pressed on all sides of the cabin, the wind scratching and whispering at the logs, as if it wanted in. And somewhere out there, beyond the snow and the dark, something was listening. This keeps to your constraints. Asterisk starts mid-action, pounding on the door. Asterisk shows only what is happening in the moment through sight, sound, touch. Asterisk keeps suspense present while introducing the woman and girl without outside exposition. Asterisk hints at danger without explaining it yet. Do you want me to move straight into Section 2, Tracks in the Snow, while keeping this tense in the moment style? Here's Section 2, Tracks in the Snow, written exactly to your requested style. Opening mid-action, holding immediate tension, no extra exposition beyond what is seen, heard, or felt in the moment. Section 2, Tracks in the Snow. Boot soles crunched outside the cabin. Jed froze halfway through splitting kindling. He glanced toward the ridge of snow by the porch, then set the axe down without a sound. The morning had come sharp and brittle, the sky a pale sheet of ice. His breath puffed white as he stepped out into the yard. Tracks. They ran along the edge of the pines, fresh enough that powder still curled at the edges. Big prints, horses, 4, maybe 5. Not his, not passing by. They'd stopped here. Jed knelt, gloved fingers brushing one impression. Deep press with slow turn of the hoof, like the rider had sat a while, watching. He rose and followed them to where the trees thinned. From there, the trail curved toward the cabin, then away again, swallowed into the timber. Behind him, the door creaked open. The little girl stood there, coat too big for her, bare feet curling against the cold plank. Get inside, he said. She didn't move. Was it them? Jed didn't answer. He scanned the ridgeline, the snow silent under the wind's thin whistle. When he came back in, the woman was by the hearth, hair damp from washing, eyes tracking him. You saw something. He pulled the door shut, latched it. Tracks. Her hand went to her side, pressing against the bandage. How close? Close enough. She crossed to the window, but he stepped between her and the shutter. Stay back. Her voice dropped. You don't understand. I understand. The room was quiet except for the crack of the fire and the girl's shallow breathing. Jed took the rifle from beside the door and slung it over his shoulder. Both of you, root cellar. Now. The girl glanced at her mother. Do what he says, the woman told her. The cellar smelled of earth and dry apples. Jed shut them in and dropped the bar. He stood above it a long while, listening, until the wind's edge carried another sound, faint, metallic, out past the tree lean. He stepped outside again. The snowfield spread white and unbroken toward the canyon mouth, but in the distance, a thin column of smoke curled into the sky. Jed's boots sank deep as he crossed the shed. He took down a snow-crusted trap, reset it with careful hands, and buried it under a drift by the trail. His eyes kept sweeping the timber. The metallic sound came again, a single rifle crack far off, echoing through the valley. By the time he returned, the woman was at the table. Her wound freshly bled through the bandage. She was trying to cut bread with a shaking hand. You shouldn't be up, he said. I can't just sit there, she muttered, setting the knife down. The girl appeared from the cellar, clutching the locket, watching him. What's in there? Jed asked, nodding at it. Her small fingers tightened. Mama says it's our whole life. He didn't press her. He took another glance at the window. The snow outside had settled smooth again, except for one place, halfway to the tree lean, where a darker shadow lay. A boot print. Not old. Jed's jaw set. He slid the rifle onto the table, sat where he could see both door and window, and poured 3 tin cups of coffee, though the girl sat untouched. No one spoke. Hours passed under the slow drip of melting snow from the roof. Each creak of the logs made the woman's eyes flick to the door. Toward dusk, the wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of hooves again, closer this time. Do you want to go straight into Section 3? The wolves close in and carry this momentum toward the siege? That's where the real tightening of the noose happens. Here's Section 3. The wolves close in written per your exact constraints. Opening in mid-action. Immediate tension. Only what is seen, heard, or felt in the moment. Section 3. The wolves close in. Hoofbeats slowed in the snow outside the cabin. Jed's hand closed around the rifle before the sound stopped. Shadows moved past the window. 4, maybe 5 shapes. Then a heavier step onto the porch. A knuckle tapped the door. Slow. Measured. Jed opened a hand's width. The man outside wore a black coat, slick with frost. His hat brimmed threw his face into shadow, but the smile showed, thin, knowing, for armed riders waited behind him, their horses stamping in the cold. "Afternoon," the man said. His voice carried a lazy drawl, but the eyes didn't match it. "Name's Kane. I'm looking for something belongs to me." Jed didn't blink. "Nothing here fits that bill." Kane's gaze shifted over Jed's shoulder to the second mug cooling on the table. His smile stayed, but his jaw worked once. "Maybe I'll take a look around." "Not today." For a moment, neither moved. Then Kane tipped his hat. "We'll be close by." He stepped down, snow crunching under his boots. The riders turned toward the canyon, slow as men in no hurry at all. Jed shut the door, slid the bolt. The woman stood near the hearth, face pale. That was him. "I guess they won't leave." Jed crossed to the window, pulled the curtain back just enough to watch. Kane's men set camp a mile down the valley, a thin thread of smoke already rising. He turned away, went to the far wall, and knelt. His fingers found a loose floorboard. Underneath lay a long oilskin bundle. He unwrapped it slow. The rifle inside was older than the girl, the steel darkened, the stock worn smooth. Near the trigger guard, an engraving caught the light, Jaded B, and a small cavalry mark. The woman's eyes followed his hands. "You've done this before." Jed didn't answer. The girl drifted closer, fingers brushing the locket. "Mama says the man outside killed people. Lots of people." Jed slid a cartridge into the chamber. "She's not wrong." The woman stepped forward, her voice low. "He's after more than me. What I have, proof, letters, deeds. It's in the locket." Jed looked at the child, then the fire. "If he gets it, they'll bury us where no one finds us." He rose, pulled a blanket from bed, and began covering the windows. Outside, the wind dropped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the storm had been. He set a kettle on the stove, but his eyes stayed on the door. Every creak of the roof, every sigh of the logs made his grip on the rifle tighten. The girl sat at the table, tracing the edge of the locket with her thumb. The woman stood by the fire, her shadow stretching long against the far wall. Beyond the cabin walls, the wolves waited. "Do you want to go ahead and write Section 4, the last stand at Boone's cabin, so the siege finally breaks and the twist fully lands?" That's where all the built-up tension pays off. Here's Section 4, the last stand at Boone's cabin. Beginning mid-action, pure immediacy, nothing outside what's seen, heard, or felt in the moment. Section 4, the last stand at Boone's cabin. Snow hissed off the roof as the first shot shattered the window. Jed dropped behind the table, glass crunching under his boots. The girl screamed once before the woman pulled her down to the floor. Another shot punched into the wall, spitting splinters. Boots thudded outside, moving fast, circling. Jed swung the rifle to the doorway just as the latch rattled. He fired once. The thud of a body hit the porch, followed by a long, wet groan. Shouts cut through the wind. 2 men rushed the front. One dropped screaming as a buried trap snapped shut, the other dove aside, cursing. Jed moved to the side window, sighted through a gap in the blanket. A shadow moved in the pines. One squeeze of the trigger, and it vanished. Silence. Then the crunch of snow shifting under careful steps. The woman's eyes met his from across the room. She clutched the girl close, hand over the locket. A boot slammed against the back door. Jed swung around as it burst inward. Kane stepped through the splinters, pistol up, eyes locked on him. "Blackjack Boone," Kane said, voice flat now. "Didn't think you'd crawl out from under your rock." Jed's finger rested on the trigger. You picked the wrong mountain. Kane fired first. The round tore a plank from the wall where Jed's head had been. Jed dropped, rolled, and came up in the same motion, his shot knocking Kane back into the frame. The Baron snarled, blood darkening his coat. He came forward anyway, swinging the pistol like a club. Jed met him in the middle of the cabin. The two crashed into the table, mugs and bread scattering. Kane slammed an elbow into Jed's ribs, drove him back toward the fire. Jed caught his wrist, twisted hard. The pistol clattered to the floor. Kane lunged for it. Jed's boot came down on the man's hand. "You're done," Jed said. Kane spat blood, grinned. "You'll hang for this." Jed pulled the trigger. The shot echoed in the rafters. Kane sagged, his head striking the floorboards with a dull knock. Outside, the last two men broke. Their horses pounded away through the snow, shouts fading down the canyon. Jed stood still, breath loud in the sudden quiet. The woman rose, her hands trembling on the girl's shoulders. "You saved us," she said. Jed didn't answer. He reloaded slow, eyes on the doorway. Only when the wind filled the silence again did he lower the rifle. He stepped outside. The sky was turning the color of steel, snow drifting down soft over the bodies. He dragged them to the far edge of the yard, piled wood, and struck a match. The fire crackled, smoke winding into the gray morning. When he came back in, the girl was at the table, the locket open. A folded paper lay inside, edges worn thin. She closed it quick when she saw him. By evening, the three of them sat by the fire without speaking. The woman's eyes stayed on the flames. The girl leaned against her, half asleep. Jed kept a seat by the door, rifle resting across his knees, the sound of the wind settling into the logs. Somewhere far off, a coyote called. That completes the story with the action-driven siege, the one-on-one duel, and the ending silence, all in the same stripped, immediate style as your earlier sections. Do you want me to now stitch all 4 sections together into full 4,000-word continuous piece, so it reads seamlessly as one legend?